Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk2363. CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we've got a sporty punk, Punk2363, with 3 Atties, nerd glasses, normal beard, and the baller headband. He's an avid NFT collector and one of the few Punk Denser owners out there. Please welcome JMason to the show. JMason, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Well, maybe we can just start off just with a brief introduction to you and your background. You know, where you sort of grew up, where you sort of studying, working, and what sort of ultimately led you into crypto and Web3.
I've always been somebody who's been interested in what we'll call alternative investments. I've never bought a stock. The ways I've always thought about making money have always been through, I played poker at a young age. In 2005, I started playing online with the poker boom and I was bad. And, for years, I really regretted not taking the time to become better because, there was so much money to be made back then, but I didn't have the bankroll management. I didn't have the patience. And I would just, so many times I would take $500, run it up into thousands, and then just put my whole roll on the table and lose it. And so I had to stop doing that. And then daily fantasy sports came along. And I decided, I was a little bit older, a little bit mature, and I decided I was going to be more principled with things. And, through that, I was able to build up a bankroll, using bankroll management and studying and, doing things other than just clicking buttons on the internet. And, that went well, but I never really got to the point where it would be a career or anything like that. I always worked at a desk, which, afforded me the ability to take some level of risk. And then I knew about crypto probably as early as 2013, 2014, but I didn't think anything of it. I probably thought it was a scam or something because I didn't understand it. I just discredited it. And because in 2017, I followed a lot of poker people and a lot of daily fantasy sports people on Twitter, I became very aware of, the money that people were making during the bull run. It was the first time I'd heard about NFTs. It wasn't punks, but I remember someone on Twitter posting a picture of a crypto kitty. And I really didn't understand that. And that was fine. I just kind of went about playing.
So what periods were you playing poker and then sort of transitioning into sort of ultimately crypto?
I started poker in 2005 and I played on and off for probably 7 years, but I was a losing player and it was not financially profitable for me. And then daily fantasy sports, I started in 2014 and I was almost immediately profitable. I would argue mostly through the lessons I learned being so financially irresponsible while I was playing poker. And then, 2017, I kind of watched the crypto bull run from the sidelines. And then I'd made enough money during playing daily fantasy sports that in 2018, I bought a Bitcoin. And I bought it for $10,000. And almost immediately, I didn't understand cycles or anything like that. And I bought, the top of that yearly cycle. and it almost immediately went down to $4,000. And I just said to myself, I said, okay, I knew Bitcoin was volatile. Like, if I can ride this out, I'll be fine with anything that happens from here. And so I held on to it, and obviously it, started making its way back up. And then I guess it was January of 2021. Daily fantasy sports was definitely getting harder. I wasn't as winning as I once was. Might have even been losing at that point. I wasn't putting a lot of money into it.
What kind of sports were you focusing on?
My best sports would be like baseball and golf, but like I played NASCAR and MMA, and like when COVID was happening, I was playing League of Legends. I jumped into anything that I thought I could get an edge on, and I was willing to work hard on it, right? At that point, I was, staying up. I had made my own spreadsheets and things like that. So and I game selected. Like, I wasn't hopping in there with the high stakes players or anything like that. So yeah, I played a little bit of everything, but my most profitable would have been baseball and golf.
Yeah, that's cool. Man, you've got a super interesting background, and I've always been curious about, poker because I mean, as a recreational player, I could just sort of see so many learnings and relevance to, managing an NFT portfolio, right? Bet sizing and all those other bits and pieces. I mean, how did you sort of start formulating some of those skill sets throughout that journey before you got to NFTs as well? Did you feel like you were well prepared for NFTs when that came along?
Yes, 100%. The mistakes I made through all these other things prepared me for NFTs. And during the 2021, 2022 bull run, I could see how people weren't prepared, right? In terms of bankroll management, in terms of understanding asymmetric risk, and kind of all these things that come with, basically managing risk, right? And, just kind of jumping in and shoving all your money on the table without any kind of understanding of what the range of outcomes actually is.
So, like with you now, I mean, how strategic do you actually get? I mean, do you drafting out spreadsheets with probabilities, expected return, expected outcome, probabilities, statistics, that kind of thing, or do you actually have a bit of structure to, I guess, your trading patterns?
No, not at all. I I'm not like, I don't understand the blockchain. I mean, I know what the blockchain is, but I'm not a technical person, and I wouldn't call myself like a traditional investor in any way, shape, or form. With sports, I understood statistics. So I was able to kind of use data sets to make projections. But what I was doing was really like working on an Excel sheet, and every single thing I needed to do, even then, I was Googling, how do I look up data from one spreadsheet to another? And then I would find out what a VLOOKUP was. So this wasn't like I didn't have this intrinsic knowledge. Like, I wasn't a statistician that was using my skill set to succeed. I was somebody who really wanted to succeed, that was doing what he had to do to make sure he succeeded. And in 2021 with NFTs, you didn't need to do that. It was so, I'll use the word gluttonous. Like, everyone was just like throwing money. You put something for sale on the floor and it was just gone. And I think it was such a nascent industry. And I mean, it still is, but you know, there were so few people at that point that knew what they were doing. And I'm not pretending to be one of them. But you just had to, sell on the way up and you would be fine. So I very much just kind of took things more for, okay, if this is going up in price, I'm going to sell because, I always had more than one of something, right? So, you keep one, sell one, basically. Um, and, I certainly looked at it more subjectively than some of my previous ventures.
Yeah, that's cool. So would you say that you were, I guess, during your poker career and your fantasy sort of sports career, were you doing those full time, or did you have something else on the side as well?
No, no, no. Yeah. So I was never a winning poker player. This was me chasing riches, and I definitely lost money consistently. And I had a desk job to, keep myself afloat. And certainly I still had a desk job while I was playing daily fantasy sports. I could never, I wasn't willing to take the risk of getting over the hump. What it came down to is I'd worked so hard for the amount I made. And I didn't make a lot. I didn't make enough to quit my job or anything like that. But I'd worked so hard for the amount I'd made that I couldn't risk it by, kind of playing the higher buy-in daily fantasy tournaments just to kind of try to retire early.
And I mean, like, if you were to look back at your, just out of curiosity, like your poker career and your fantasy sports career, like any sort of wins that you can recollect?
Poker, no. Like I was bad. Like I was basically gave the poker idea as, my first attempt at chasing riches. And certainly never won anything of any value that I can remember. Daily fantasy for sure. I won some NFL GPPs and some NHL, PGA, NBA. I probably won a GPP in most sports for five figures. Never won a Millie Maker or anything like that, or even really competed. But those weren't the tournaments I was playing in because I didn't see those as something that were worth chasing.
And your, not to sort of dox yourself as well, but your day job, was that finance related, or was that something completely different?
It was something completely different. It was just like it was what I would call a regular desk job. Nothing of any, like I wasn't someone coming into Web3 with a lot of wealth or anything like that, right? I was someone coming in as, maybe somebody who'd explored alternative investments before. So I wasn't totally a fish out of water, but, very much, like not a guy that would ever fly first class or, drive a fancy car or anything like that.
Yeah, gotcha. No, that's cool. No, super, super fascinating backstory you got there. And okay, so let me get this straight. It was poker, fantasy sports, and then ultimately Bitcoin during that sort of rush, which I think everybody got wrecked in as well. So you're not the only one, but you held the Bitcoin. And at what point did you start getting back into buying NFTs? I think you mentioned that you stumbled across CryptoKitties.
Well, yeah, so that was in 2017. I was just became aware of CryptoKitties. I saw this and I was like, I don't understand this. But it always stayed in my mind as just this thing that existed. But I certainly didn't buy one. And at that point, I didn't even own any crypto. But 2021, I found out about NBA Top Shot. And, as somebody that, was reasonably early to poker and failed, was reasonably early to DFS and marginally succeeded, I decided that I was going to take a financial risk with Top Shot. And so immediately I went in hard. And I knew enough that when I was buying these NBA Top Shot moments, that I was going to try to sell as many as I could as I was buying them. So I built up a reasonably sized bankroll just flipping Top Shots moments in late January of 2021. And back then on Top Shots, there was a site called Crypto Slam. And Crypto Slam would have all the Top Shot sales data and things like that. And, I would look at it to get a sense of what things were worth. But it also had data for other NFTs. And I kept seeing CryptoPunks there on CryptoSlam as, one of the highest sales volume NFTs. So I looked into what CryptoPunks were, and, I immediately understood that this was better than Top Shot. And I had just paid $10,000 for an Anthony Davis dunk. And I realized at that point I could buy a CryptoPunk for $10,000. So I immediately sold the Anthony Davis moment at a loss, maybe for like $6,000 or something like that, and cobbled together enough funds to buy a CryptoPunk.
Mate, just come back a little bit as well for some context. When you said you went in pretty hard with NBA Top Shots, like what does hard what does hard look like? Were you buying packs? Were you staying up late nights for different drops? Were you trading on secondary? Like what did that sort of look like?
Yeah, I was in the queue for every pack. I was, taking money from my bank account, transferring it into NBA Top Shots, and buying as many moments as I could with all the funds I had available to me. I basically, I'll call it all in. I went all in on Top Shots for, what I was comfortable with at the time.
It was a crazy run back then. I was dabbling in it from here, but I had to jump on via VPN because otherwise I couldn't get access. But things were flying off. But the thing is, you couldn't get your money out of Top Shots, though, right? Like I think it was hard to. There was no off ramp. I think it was sort of stuck in there. You can trade within the ecosystem, but it's hard to pull your money back off in the early days.
It was so you could get it out in. So I mean, that was the other interesting thing about Top Shots. All taken aside for a second is, not only was I buying moments on secondary, but I was also buying moments from what I'll call the Top Shots OGs. Individuals that were the beta testers in like the late 2020s. And, a lot of them wanted to trade the moments with ETH. And to this point, I only had my Bitcoin. I didn't have any ETH. And, I didn't even know what a MetaMask wallet was. And I remember offering to pay this guy on PayPal for his moment, and he didn't want to dox himself. So he was like, no, I want you to send me ETH. And I wanted these moments so badly that this guy like walked me through setting up a MetaMask wallet. I onboarded some cash, bought some ETH. This was the first ETH I ever had. And I sent him the funds. And that was the first time I ever had any Ethereum.
Was it a purely trust deal? Like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, it was just Top Shot Discord. And it was a pure trust deal.
Can I ask what you bought and how much?
I'm trying to remember. I think I bought a different Anthony Davis dunk, like an Anthony Davis dunk and a Luka Doncic dunk for maybe like 25, for like maybe 2,500. They're worth much less now, but I think I sold them.
Yeah, nice. No, that's cool. That's a cool story.
Yeah, but you mentioned the offboarding. So what you could do, you couldn't offboard it into your bank account, but you could get paid in USDC in chunks. I can't remember how much the chunks were, but they weren't insignificant. It was like maybe like $2,500 or $5,000 chunks. And so now that I had this Ethereum wallet, I was just constantly routing USDC payments to my wallet and transferring it into ETH.
Just going back and picking up on what you said when you're looking at Crypto Slam, you're looking at all the volume there, and I think Top Shots was probably carrying the top spot for volume for quite some time. And I'm sure CryptoPunks would have been very close. And you said that you felt like it was a no-brainer to start going a little bit deeper on CryptoPunks and converting some of the profits from Top Shots into CryptoPunks. Like, why is that? Okay, what was going through your mind at that time?
I immediately understood the scarcity. There were 10,000 CryptoPunks, and there were, Top Shot moments were trending to infinity. Even if there were 50 LeBron James dunks, cosmic LeBron James dunks, or, 100 Anthony Davis, like holo dunks or something like that, right? The amount of fixed moments was infinite. And there were only 10,000 CryptoPunks. And they were definitively more historical. So, I was like, okay, so I just paid $10,000 for this Anthony Davis dunk. And, there's how many Anthony Davis moments out there? There's all these things that exist in the Top Shot ecosystem, but there's only 10,000 CryptoPunks. And at that point, I knew nothing else. I didn't know about rarities or anything like that. But I knew that if I was spending money on this, it was better appropriated spending money on CryptoPunks.
Nice. Good bet. And how what was your first step into CryptoPunks? Like, what was your sort of approach? Did you research, ask around before you start buying? Or
Yeah, I went into the CryptoPunks Discord, and it was an amazing place back then. A really, really cool place because it was, I mean, February of 2021. It's really just like the OGs hanging out there. There's not that many posts. You pop in, you say, I want to buy a punk, and everybody's just, there, and they're so excited for you. And they're like cheering you on as you buy the punk. So I was just in there. I was talking about, what I wanted to buy. And, the big thing that was said to me was get a punk that you'd be proud using as your profile picture. And I just said, okay. And, the beautiful thing about Discord is, this is all like documented. You can go back to like February 14th, 2021, and you can see me having the conversation with people that are still there today. And, they're coaching me through buying a punk. And I just think it's super cool. And, then they all give like the one of us gifts and things like that. It was a cool feeling. It was a cool day.
that was a nice time to spend Valentine's Day, February 14th, right?
Yeah, I think it was actually like like late night on February 13th, if we're being technical. I could be wrong about that, but I think I was just like up late, kind of grinding NFTs, and so I wasn't ignoring my wife or anything like that.
So talk to us about your trait selection process. Like, when you're thinking through what sort of appealed to you and what you'd love to be repping as your identity in sort of the Web3 space. Like, what sort of traits were you shortlisting, and how did you sort of end up at your current one?
I mean, price was certainly a concern for me at that point. Couldn't I didn't have infinite money to spend, so it had to be something, lurking around the floor. I bought mine for 10, and I think the floor was 8 at that point. And, I like the headband because I think the headband really did speak to, you know, the fact that Top Shot brought me here. It's kind of like the basketball punk. The nerd glasses speak to the fact that I think at my core, I am, a statistical person. I would fancy myself in some way, shape, or form to be a nerd. Maybe not in like the glasses and pocket protector sense, but certainly in the sense of like, I can get very geeked out by, very obscure things like DFS or NFTs or things like that. And then the shadow beard, just I think the shadow beard rounded off the punk nicely, just to give it a little bit more of a completed look.
No, he's definitely super clean. I love the headband. Some notable ones like Serena Williams has got one. I think Noah Davis has got one too.
He does, yeah.
So there's a few ballers out there. They're really cool. And if money wasn't an issue, like what would be your dream punk? Do you think?
If money wasn't an issue, I mean, an alien obviously would just be like the Perugia punk is iconic. Mr. 703's PFP, I think that's the best 5 trade punk. And obviously the 7 trade. Like I'm a simple man. I like
Well,
I like the
Perugia's putting his
finest
up for
punks,
sale, right? Perugia's,
I
in case you were looking there, JMason.
I that would be nice. I don't know what I'd do with it, but I'd take it.
And so you only managed to pick up one punk, or you got a few?
So I had a second punk. There was a little bit of a dip in, I think it was like June or July of 2021. I bought 4496, which was a floor punk. It was a lady with a mohawk. It was like a punk. It was like a lady with a mohawk, and she had some lipstick and some eyeshadow. And I picked that up for, I think, 18 ETH. And then as soon as the V1 You remember when there was that V1 lawsuit or like V1? I think did they sue them or there was something going on with V1 when V1s kind of first inched their way into the conversation. I decided that was a good time to sell. So I sold it. That was January 2022, I think. Just kind of I didn't know what was going to happen with V1s. In hindsight, I think it's easy to say nothing. But at the time, I was just like, it just made sense to kind of risk off at that point and, and sit with one punk instead of two for what my financial position was.
Whilst we're on the topic then, like, I mean, how do you feel about V1 punks in general?
I kind of see it like, we always compare punks to say like the Mona Lisa, right? Like if somewhere in like a cellar, somebody found, a half finished version of the Mona Lisa, that would probably be worth something. By itself in a museum, it would be nothing. But if you put it up next to the Mona Lisa and said, hey, this only exists because they kind of tried this first, then people will be like, okay, I get it. Like, this probably has some value too. So, I get that part of it, but the punks are the finished product. And to me, the finished product is always going to have more value than the prototype.
Yeah, I probably agree with you too. I think there's, the whole V1 story, I've spoken about it with a lot of punks on PunkCast. I think a good one to go back to is Hemba. And he's got the insight in terms of, obviously he claimed like 1,000 punks, right? So he's still holding a lot of V1 punks, but offers an interesting sort of story and background to that whole journey that you were speaking about during that whole phase. But definitely a place to play, and it keeps the conversation about punks alive, right? It forms part of the discourse, which makes it super interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what it comes down to for me is do you have your V1 punk?
I don't have mine, but I've got a different one. So I'm trying to find my V1 punk at some stage. You?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have mine either. And I think what it comes down to is like, how much would I pay for my V1 punk? And I'd probably, just to have the complete set, and I'd probably pay like, a couple ETH for my V1 punk. So that to me means that they must have value.
Yeah. Makes sense. Right. And, like when you're collecting or, looking across the NFT space at the moment, are you net collecting anything or are you just sitting on your bags at the moment?
I'm definitely just sitting in my bags. I don't think I bought anything since August-ish of 2021.
Yeah. And notice you've got Fidenza as well. Like, what kinds of things do you like collecting? And
I think anyone would have this answer, but, I think for me, I like collecting things with some form of, provenance. I like collecting things that don't require any sort of developer influence to continue to hold value. So, if you look at my bags, it's, I have squiggles, I have a punk, I have a Fidenza. I do have 2 cyber Kongs as well. But I probably should have sold those when the floor was 200 ETH.
insane. The Genesis Kongs.
I have 2 Genesis Kongs, and I think they have a better chance than most in terms of things that offer like utility.
Yeah.
But that was a bag drop for sure.
No, it makes sense. So your collecting style is more collecting pieces that have historical cultural significance, which I think a Punk Denza fits that ticket nicely, and no external dependencies, basically, right? Which is a nice way to invest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And if you were to look across the Twitter space or the punk community in general, do you have like a favorite punk personality that comes to mind?
I like 6529. I think everything he says makes sense to me. And I think that's how I think that's how he wants to present himself anyway. I think sometimes, the seize the memes of production might be a little bit bombastic, but I do think that, generally he's. It's hard to call someone principled when they spent 1,000 ETH on a Fidenza, but his thought processes, are often quite principled.
No, I agree. I love 6529. He seems like the mature sort of voice in the space that was so much needed when all this craziness is going around. Just out of curiosity as well, when you spoke about seize the memes of production, like what do you think of that collection of his? When you say bombastic, do you feel like it's a bit sensationalist? And yeah, I mean, what do you mean by that?
I mean, yeah, I think what that means to me is, we need to rush to get all these things before someone else gets them or before corporations get them. And I don't think there's that big of a rush. I think memes have existed since the beginning of time, and memes will continue to exist going forward. And, certainly some people are going to capitalize more than others. And I think his collection for people that want to hold something and look at it is fantastic. But certainly, I don't see that as like I haven't bought any of those. I don't see that as something that's going to uh, create generational wealth for anyone except maybe him.
Yeah, got it. No, that's fair. But it is an interesting concept, though, right? I think trying to draw attention and encouraging people by stories and memes, and I think that's one thing that NFTs has taught me is everything's just based on narrative and story, and memes basically propagates all of that attention, right? In a fun way. But be interesting to sort of see where this goes. Just did you get into any of that meme coin craze, Pepe, and all of that stuff while we're talking about memes?
No, that's I mean, obviously I know about it. I've never bought a meme coin. It just doesn't fit with my investing style. When I see things like Pepe, I obviously wish it did. But I also recognize that, if you're going to buy Pepe, you probably had to buy like 20 others that failed. So it's what about you? Are you in?
I bought a small boom bag. I've just taken my capital off the table and just letting the rest ride now. But yeah, I'm with you. Like I miss Dogecoin and I miss Shiba. I was just going, this is kind of silly. It makes no sense. But then when you get into the NFT space, then you start understanding communities. Then if just as long as somebody finds value in it and can meme it and actually has a strength and power, I think it might actually have something. Pepe is an interesting one too, in the sense that I think it really it really ties together the altcoin community and the NFT community, which have always been separate for quite some time. And I think, Pepe being such a huge meme can really propagate this to a new level too. So look, I'm not advocating for Pepe. I'm not sure where it'll go. I think as it sits today, it's about $500 million in the space of 2 weeks of market cap, right? So, but yeah, I think it's got a lot more meme value than Sheep from what I can sort of sense. But yeah, we've got to get you into some of these shitcoins, JMason.
I don't know what it would take, but again, you see stuff like Pepe, and I mean, there's Pepe's probably had a bunch of derivatives since then, right? Even in the last 2 weeks, and I'm sure all of them are worth close to zero now. So I do feel like in a lot of ways you have to be very good at picking your spots, but like you said, it's really no different than NFTs, right? In terms of how you think your way through it.
Yeah, totally. And if you look back against your NFT career to date, do you have any sort of wins or losses worth mentioning?
I mean, yes, I think we all do, I hope. But my biggest win almost for sure would be Fidenzas. That's kind of when I was really starting to build momentum. And, you asked before about like spreadsheets and things like that. I certainly didn't do any of that, but I believe I might be wrong with this, but I believe Fidenzas were the first curated art blocks piece that I minted. And I just remember Fidenzas came out, and I remember researching and reading about Tyler Hobbs and immediately thinking, like, this is going to be a big one. This guy's been a generative artist for a long time being like 4 years. And the work he's doing looks really cool. So, and I can kind of, the beautiful thing about this is I say this, that, I'm this great visionary. And, I minted two, but then maybe like what I would call my all-time claim to fame in NFTs at this point is, and the blockchain can confirm this. I bought the very first Fidenza off the secondary market.
Nice. What did you buy? What did you buy that at?
I bought that for 0.4.
Wow. It's insane.
No, it wasn't a Dutch auction back then. They all minted for 0.17 Ethereum. I minted two. And then I bought another one. And because I didn't know how to set up a bunch of wallets or anything like that. I was proud of myself for being able to set up two wallets. So before they were even done minting, I bought another one off secondary. And then I bought four more over the next day.
Wow.
So I had 7 Fidenzas.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so my biggest win was just selling 5 of those Fidenzas on the way up. And my biggest loss was trading one of those Fidenzas almost immediately for some digital land. Yeah, so that was bad. That was a big regret. I sold the digital land almost immediately. As soon as I made the trade, I was just like, I had huge regrets. It turned out I knew it was a nice Fidenza. This was before like rarities or anything like that were really like big, but it ended up being the 7th rarest Fidenza. I think it was Fidenza 7670.
Yeah, I love the soft shapes.
Yeah, it was soft shapes, cool. It was just like a nice Fidenza, and I fumbled it, and I still think about it. So that was almost for sure. That was almost for sure my biggest loss.
So Fidenzas were your biggest win and loss. Amazing story.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when you have 7, you can't manage it perfectly, right? Overall, it was definitely a win.
Yeah, I gotta say it's probably one of my most favorite collection, and I'm dying to get one in the vault at some stage. But unfortunately, the bear market's made me poor.
For sure. Yeah, I kept the one that I minted just to have, and I think it's good to always keep one because you never know. I sold my Fidenzas on the way up, which meant I sold one for 6 ETH and one for 7 ETH and one for 12 ETH. So it was like, I find it hard to regret those because it's like at that point, it was already very quickly like the best performing art blocks collection. And you just never think it's going to have like a 300 ETH floor.
That was insane, that AB run that summer. But and did you get any of the physicals printed out?
I didn't get any of the physicals printed out. Again, because I didn't know. I knew I was going to sell most of them. And I thought that especially when you're selling to collectors at a high price, Tyler Hobbs was only ever going to print out one. So I knew that keeping the physicals with the NFT would enhance its value to a certain sect of collectors.
Yeah. Makes sense. Oh man. Wish I had the opportunity to get 7 Denzas in the bag too, but yeah, your one too is an absolutely beautiful one. Just having a look at it now.
Thanks. Yeah, I minted that one.
Yeah, it's it's a beauty. Yeah, and there's I guess there's only a handful of Punks out there now. So I think we were just speaking before the call, but I think Suzanne and Roto were the 2 that sort of came to mind. But puts you in a very unique class of punks.
Yeah. So again, what's funny is, obviously back then, what was that, like June or July of 2021, quite a few people that had CryptoPunks, because there's a lot of crossover between CryptoPunks and art blocks. Quite a few people that minted CryptoPunks or that owned CryptoPunks also minted or bought Fidenzas very early. So back then, the reason I did it is we were all in Punk Discord and everybody was doing it, right? Everybody was, it was maybe not the first Punk background. I'm sure people had backgrounds before and after, but it was, there was likely a point pretty early in the generation of Fidenza that, a high percentage of people in Punk Discord had their CryptoPunk with a Fidenza background. Of course, as prices rose, people would get rid of those and because they would be selling their Fidenzas.
Crazy time. Mate, I gotta say, I mean, that early, you being that early, you must have got a lot of alpha from, the Punk Discord, because I came a little bit later, and it just felt like I was there was alpha floating around all over the place, and I sort of feel like as well, the punks were also a signal of what was cool and what was in, and also setting, I guess, the taste trends for, I guess, the whole NFT space at that time, right? So 2021 was a special vintage year for punks, I think.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. There was an amazing post on Twitter from Emmy, who used to hang out in Punk's Discord quite a bit. And I think she since deleted the post on Twitter, but she said it was something along the lines of, March 2021 in Punk Discord was a magical time. And I hadn't thought about it really in that way, but it really, really resonated with me in terms of like, you really had the perfect mix of people being really eager, people being really helpful, and people basically like printing money, right? So no, people weren't jaded yet. People weren't too big time. Like so many of the people that I remember from Punk's Discord then have left, and they're doing other things because Punk's Discord really isn't the same as it was back then. But, again, I think like anything, I'm sure, you know, things evolve, they get more corporate or more, um, you know, and as people, get wealth or clout or influence, they go off and they start doing their own things rather than, hanging out in something that, isn't necessarily moderated by them. But I got so much alpha. And again, it was things like cyberkongs. Like the guys were talking about cyberkongs in there the day that cyberkongs were created. People were buying them for like zero point zero 0.01 ETH or something like that. And I was just like, what are these stupid monkeys? I'm not going to buy these. People were talking about squiggles when they were, you know, worth almost nothing. And I was just like, what are these squiggly lines? I could make that in paint. So it certainly took me a while to understand what things were outside of punks, which again is a little bit of a regret, but like I got there eventually. So that's the important thing, right?
Well, you got the most important one, which is the important part. Do you remember any sort of names that you were vibing with back then in the Discord in 2021? Like any sort of names that come to mind?
I mean, the people, yeah, I mean, there were the people that were there a lot back then were, it was like D's and he and Cat. Those were kind of like the pillars of the Discord, right? Those are the people that were in there all the time. Justin, of course. Mr. 703 was there quite a bit. And then like all the mods, obviously. Dave was there quite a bit. Cry. Um, all the people that they're not really there anymore.
Sounds like a super amazing cohort. If you think about those names you just mentioned, most of them are off doing some really big things on their own. Well, mate, if you were to describe punk culture in a few words, how would you describe that?
The word I like to use is independent. And I mean that you can take that a couple ways, right? Like, I mean, I think punks are independent in that they don't require any outside involvement to be successful, which again to me is a really important principle of what my NFT investing thesis is. But also independent because wider spread punk culture to me would be, and then you're being yourself and you're acting independently and you're doing what feels good to you, as long as it doesn't harm other people. So I think both internally and externally, punk culture, I would use the word independent.
Yeah. With that in mind, then, and I think with your investing philosophy in mind, that you don't like, external dependencies for your investments in NFTs. How do you feel about the overall Yuga acquisition of punks?
I guess when it comes down to it, I'd prefer it didn't happen. I don't think punks are any better off being acquired by Yuga. I think it does take away the culture in some way, shape, or form. But at the same time, I also get that the creators of CryptoPunks, Larva Labs, you know, they didn't want what punks were becoming. These were people that just wanted to create, a little experiment on the blockchain that turned into something more vast than they could have ever fathomed. And, were being surrounded by an industry that was going to require some form of stewardship. And they didn't want to be the stewards. And, in some ways that makes it even cooler. Um, but I think in a perfect world, Larva Labs still had some level of curation over CryptoPunks.
Yeah, so I mean, like, given Yuga's current position at the moment as well, I'm with you. I think sort of understand and appreciate it too. And I think they've left us alone, and appreciate Matt and John's position too. Not probably surpass what they had imagined with CryptoPunks. Like, what would be a good outcome for punks going forward? Do you think?
To me, the optimal outcome is just to continue to hold their place as, kind of the grandfather of NFTs. And, I'm sure you're aware of what's happening. There's something going on Blur right now. I don't pretend to understand it, but now all of a sudden you can put your punk up for loans, and there's some sort of lending bidder situation. Anyway, I have no idea what this is, all well over my head. But like stuff like this, I see these things as blips in the radar. It's probably going to make the floor cost of punks go down in the short to medium term. The big outlook I would have is just leave punks alone. There's always talk about gamification of NFTs. And I think a lot of people think that that's going to be playing some sort of video game or something like that, where you buy NFT skins and pay in bananas or pay in Ethereum and things like that. But what I'm realizing is the gamification of NFTs is already happening, and Blur's doing it. Be it with the buying and selling of punks that was happening earlier, or now this kind of, lending platform, and they're doing something with Azuki too, where you can do like a down payment. Like there's people out there that are quickly working to solve this game and outplay other people at it. Because for sure, there's going to be losers in this game. There's people that are going to do this and lose money, and there's going to be people that do this and win money. So I think the gamification of NFTs is playing out right now in ways that we didn't fully expect. And I wish punks weren't involved, but I guess the reason they're involved is because most other NFTs are going to zero. So you get a loan out against your punk without getting liquidated the next day.
No, I'm with you. I think punks are probably better off alone in the scheme of things. And if you could pass on a message to the next owner of your punk, 2363, what would you like to say to them?
So what I'll say is my first thought to answering that question, it would be, you know, something of like sadness or things like that. But I will say any NFT I've ever sold, it's stressful selling an NFT. It really is. Especially a high value NFT, because once you put that up for sale at a reasonable price, you don't see it as yours anymore. You see it as the putting this up for 63 ETH. This is worth 63 ETH. I have 63 ETH in my wallet now. So I'd probably express great gratitude to them for buying my punk, because, selling it's a very stressful thing. I mean, we see it all the time. The one thing I love about the Larva Labs website, or I guess it's the CryptoPunks website now, is the transaction history, right? So you can watch people panicking historically, just like lowering and lowering and lowering their price. So if somebody buys my punk, I'm going to be very grateful because it's hard to sell high value NFTs. As someone who sold a bunch of Fidenzas, it's you're happy when it's over.
That's the message. JMason, this was super fun to unpack your personal and punk story, man. Any final closing comments, and how can people find you?
I should say I feel very grateful to have a CryptoPunk. I feel very grateful to be part of the CryptoPunk community. As somebody who, as I said earlier, who just, came through this world in a desk job without any sort of financial or technical background, you know, being able to have a CryptoPunk and not sell it for as long as I have, it's a feeling of gratitude. And I'm grateful for what you're doing here. I think this is really cool. I think you've done over 50 CryptoPunks now, and connecting with them in this way is, I think it does a lot more than any conference or Discord can do, because you're really getting to know the CryptoPunks. And, I think if you go to a conference or something like that, it's very easy to get lost in the mix, especially, a lot of Web3 people would be considered introverted and the extroverts would kind of take over. So I'm really grateful for what you're doing here. I'm definitely going to listen to some more PunkCasts and, get to know the punks in ways that I otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the kind words, JMason. And looking forward to seeing what you do next. And hopefully, I don't know if you ever attend one of these punk brunches, but maybe we can sort of connect at one of those events as well. But yeah, so again, thank you for your time, man. This has been super fun. And guys, that wraps up another episode of PunkCast for the week. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with another punk. Bye for now.